Your Town Matters is funded by the Government of Canada through the Local Journalism Initiative and supported by Cactus Media, Canada's independent community television association.
I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to a special episode of Your Town Matters with Mayor Doug Naish of St. Andrews. Today we're going to talk about, thank you for being here today, Doug.
Well, thank you for asking me again.
Obviously, the climate has changed since the last time you were on the show. We're dealing with social distancing in the era of COVID-19, and I'd love to just hear how the first month has been for St. Andrews and what's happening on a local level.
Well, look, it's been a whirlwind here, just like it has been everywhere around the world. Things change almost not by the minute, but certainly by the hour sometimes, and certainly by the day. So, but all in all, one thing I really have to say is that I am so proud of everybody in St. Andrews for the way in which they have stepped up to the plate, and that they have already adapted to a whole new order of the world, and doing things that are it's very difficult to change your personal habits, especially when there was nothing wrong with them in the first place. In other words, we have a very huggy community. People shake hands. People feel comfortable in close proximity to one another. So it's really not normal to have to think about your fellow citizen as someone that you want to stay away from. Mm-hmm. And so that's probably the hardest thing, is to change lifelong personal habits that are good habits in normal circumstances. But it's anything but normal these days.
Now, obviously, things can happen a lot quicker on a very local level. How are some of the first ways you responded to hearing about COVID-19, and what decisions did you make right off the bat?
Yeah, actually, I think that first of all, I have to praise our town staff, because our senior staff are excellent. All of our town staff are excellent. Everyone stepped up to the plate at Town Hall. You know, we didn't have any reluctance to do what needed to be done. Everybody's on duty still going forward, and we're taking all the necessary precautions, because we certainly don't want our staff to become ill and incapable of discharging their duties. So we're very careful about that. So we've been getting very good advice from the very beginning as members of council. And I think that because we know our community very well, because it is a relatively small community, and this time of the year it's an even smaller community, because here we are with our permanent residents, which are still numbering less than 2,000. So we get to know everybody fairly well, and what the market will bear. So some of the things that we did very quickly, we actually didn't have to do on our own. For example, Paddlefest, which is usually the kickoff of our tourism season. You know, I think it's 24 years it's been in place now, and it gets better all the time. It's a fantastic group of people that organize and run that festival. They got together, they made the decision, they came to us and said, we don't see any way that we can safely do this, and therefore we're telling you that we're canceling for this year. We didn't have to go to them and tell them that they had to cancel. So we're very lucky in that respect. And so those are some of the things that we've done. And right now we're grappling with, and I think the decision is going to be inevitable, but we're grappling with what to do about Canada Day. You know, last year, I'm told, I can't count anything, and I can't estimate very well, but people that were in the know tell me that we probably had, during the course of Canada Day last year, we had 10,000 people in and out of town, you know. Well, that just can't happen in the middle of a pandemic, and yes, it's 2 months away, but 2 months is not very far to worry about, and a little more than 2 months, and it takes a while to cancel those things. So we're going to have to deal with that. So what we did is and one of the probably the most important things, and it's gotten a lot of press lately, which I'm grateful for, is the town, with the assistance of the Kiwanis Club and others, and the businesses in town that were essential services, getting together very quickly to try to allow people to stay in their own homes but still get served and to get the essential items that they need to have through a volunteer delivery program. I think this is happening all over, and it's happening a lot in smaller communities, which I think is just an indication that local government is the government that most people go to first, no matter what their problem is, and that's the way it should be.
And that service expands beyond groceries. There's also check-ins with vulnerable citizens.
Absolutely. In fact, that was one of the things that I'm most proud of, is that was something that, again, it came through a combination of the town and our town staff and the Kiwanis Club, a community organization with time on their hands and people that wanted to serve, because that's what they do. That's their mission, to serve our community. And they've done that for many, many, many years, probably 75 years plus at least have been doing that. And so this is just the perfect opportunity for them, and they've stepped up to the plate and risen to the occasion. And it's mostly, the volunteers have been organized mostly by the Kiwanis Club. So we've had all kinds of help. And even when we had to step in and say, no, we're not going to do this, or we're going to close the arena early, we got no flack from that. You would think that that's a question that most people would ask. Say, well, did people get all upset? And they said no, because people understand. The right-thinking people in our community understand that this is a very serious matter. This is a life and death matter, or could be. And so far, we've managed to, I think, flatten the curve, as they say, in our community, because we have taken on the responsibility for social distancing and physical distancing, and we have said to people, stay home. If you don't have to go anywhere, stay home, and many people are staying home. And I think, just to be, I don't want to be inflammatory here, but the way I've come to look at this over this last few weeks is that the best assumption anyone can make when going outside is that everyone you see is probably infected with this virus. That's your best assumption, because then you will judge your actions accordingly. Because good citizenship is about personal accountability, really.
Now, definitely in our community, we have a smaller winter population, a much larger summer population, and part of the new normal is that a lot of people have come home early or come back to St. Andrews early, whether they've been away all winter. I've heard wonderful stories about locals dropping off cars and keys at the airport. Are we still anticipating another wave of people coming home?
Yes, I think so. Not only people coming home from away, outside of the country, I think there's still going to be some of that, although I would assume that most of those people who went away for the winter, say to Florida or other places sunny, have gotten back now, because that would be what they would normally have done. That would have been their plan. But the next wave are the people that actually come here from somewhere else just for the summer or for part of the summer, that own property here. And so, again, we're going to have to get information out to them, but most of those people are going to be by that time well aware of the COVID situation, but we will endeavor to do that. That will be part of our strategy from the town, to make sure that the people who may live most of the year in places like Calgary or Toronto, but they have homes in this area, and they tend to use St. Andrews, even if they don't live right in the town limits, they live just outside, and therefore they come here for their groceries and their supplies of all sorts. And so we'll probably need to communicate with them and say, let us know what we can do to help you, because clearly, if you own property, you should be here, and you can be here, and we can't prevent you from being here, nor do we want to. But that leads me to the other issue that is, I think, foremost, and we've received a number, both our staff and members of council received numbers of concerns about the fact that already this year we seem to be seeing some people as day trippers coming here from other places to take advantage of our wharf and our parks. And in a normal year, that would be wonderful. In fact, we've spent the last few years trying to increase the seasons of tourism in our town, because for 125 years we've welcomed everybody to St. Andrews who wanted to visit and tried to give them the best possible experience. But right now it pains me to say that I have to tell people who aren't from here, please don't come here right now. And we are trying to get through social media and other means, get that message out to people. And we may have to start to enforce that if we don't get the message through in time, because as the weather warms up, people are going to want to come here. I remember before I lived here, I came here very often. My family and I, we used to come here because it was a wonderful place to come and walk around, right? And but right now, unfortunately, the message that has to go out to people that we would normally welcome with open arms is that we're not open for business. You know, we don't have washrooms, we don't have restaurants, we don't have things to buy. We're just simply shut down, and we're trying our best to provide the services that are required by our full-time residents or people that are living here at the moment, and so I really would ask for the forbearance of the general public and say, you know, on Easter Sunday when you wake up in St. John and it's a beautiful day, don't think first about driving down to St. Andrews and walking on the beach, because it really is going to be potentially to your detriment and to ours. So please don't do that, and cut us a break here, cut us some slack, and hopefully we'll all get over this together without any casualties, and we'll be back in business soon, and we'll be turning out the welcome mat so you can come back.
Yeah, but the beauty of being on a peninsula is there really is just the one way in. So is there a possibility of doing a checkpoint?
Yes, there is. We have already talked about that. We haven't made that decision. We made a decision at council meeting last night, in fact, that we would go forward with a more aggressive information program to tell people, just as I'm doing today, thank you, not to come right now, because we're just not prepared to receive you right now. We can't do it in good conscience, and we can't do it in good health. But then when it comes time, if we don't get the response that we want by our media campaign, then yes, I think that's the next step, and I think we are prepared to do that. We've already asked our police officers that are assigned here under our contract, they are our municipal police force in effect, to do more patrolling, to be available, to check on people that don't appear to have an essential reason for being here, and I believe that will be done over the weekend while we're doing our social media campaign to encourage people, or discourage people, I guess, of coming here right now. But at some points in time, you know, we can't allow people from the outside to come here and compromise their health, or particularly the health of what is a very vulnerable population, because we have so many seniors in our town, you know, and again, I go back to praising the people in our town. I drive around self-isolated in my little Fiat almost every day, just to see what's going on in the community, so that I can talk to staff and to find out if there's anything I see that doesn't make sense to me, or may need to be looked into. And I do that. And the other day, driving down Water Street early in the morning on Sunday, you know, I could look at every car that was there. There were only about a half a dozen of them, and I said, oh, you know, that's someone whose office is in that building, and they must be doing a little work on Sunday morning, or that person's going into the grocery store, you know. So you knew why those people were there, and they were doing things that were legitimate and necessary, and not compromising the health of anyone. So as long as we can do that, we're fine, but we are going to monitor that religiously to make sure that we don't have to intervene further and maybe start turning people around. I get a lot of my hot tips on how to be a mayor by watching Mayor Tory of Toronto on TV most mornings, and you know, look, they have exactly the same problems that we do on a much larger scale. So, but the issues are all the same, you know, which is what's interesting about whether you have a small municipality or a large one. The range of issues that you have to deal with is just about the same, right? And the frequency with which you have to deal with them is more often, and the scale of what you have to deal with is more. It was interesting that when we were having discussions about whether we should have checkpoints and turning people around. They passed a bylaw in Toronto very quickly because they needed to, because people were not paying attention to the isolating and the self-distancing in the community, and overnight they passed this bylaw, requiring people by law to be 6 feet apart, and they immediately were able to put 100 police officers and 200 bylaw enforcement officers fanned out in their parks. Wow. And over the first weekend that was in place, they turned around approximately 900 people who were not following the rules through an education program and convinced them that they either had to go home or follow the rules. And they only issued 16 tickets in the entire city in that time period. But the message came across, right? So if you're going to educate, that's fine, but some people just refuse to be educated, and they need to get a ticket. And those 16 people got $1,000 tickets. So I'm not saying that's what we're going to do, but I'm saying that we're going to do whatever is necessary to do in order to make sure that people stay safe.
And you're right, education plays such a huge role in it, because the rules are changing every day as we, as a world, respond to this uncertain times. So what are the rules now in St. Andrews when it comes to going to parks or trails or beaches? What would you say is the best approach for citizens to take at the current moment? Obviously, this could change. Yeah,
most of our trails are still open. Certainly, again, the distancing rules apply. Those are emergency rules put in place by the provincial government, which are mandatory. They're not optional, and we are saying to people, streets are open, sidewalks are open, walk throughout town. Our parks are, in effect, not open, but they're also, it's not possible to put a fence up around Langmaid Park. There's a sign there that says, don't go in the park, and it's unfortunate, but at this point in time, that's what we have to do. We have talked, the Blockhouse is another popular place where people go and they congregate, and we have gotten dispensation from Parks Canada, a federal government agency, because we actually operate the park on a contract with them. We run the park, we staff it in the summer times, and they've said to us, whatever you think is necessary to do for your municipality, we're okay with that. So if you want to close down the Blockhouse property, that when we have not yet made that decision, but we talked about it last night at council, and it may be because that's one of the places where 2 weekends ago, when we had that nice warm Saturday, that park was filled with cars that I didn't recognize. Not that I know everyone in St. Andrews, but I certainly...
Pretty close.
Pretty close. And I would say without hesitation that most of the people that use the Blockhouse to walk their dogs, or the beach at low tide there, are walking to the park from their houses, walking their dogs or with their kids and whatever. So you see them there, but most of the people that I saw there that day were not people I recognized, and therefore I don't blame them, because I would have been there in a normal circumstance. That would have been wonderful. We would have encouraged that. I would have gone down and socialized with them and said, welcome to St. Andrews. But right now it's just too dangerous. We can't do that. So there may be movements in that regard coming up to this long Easter weekend. We may have to close off some of those facilities. The other thing I might want to mention to the public, and this just arose yesterday, we were just notified by the province that one of the emergency measures that's been added has been to restrict the use of wharfs by boats that carry more than 12 people. So what that means, and that's been put in place to the end of June. So what that means is that the whale watching tour boats, for example, that use our wharf will not be able to operate between now and the end of June, and beyond that we just don't know yet. So all of that has to happen, and we will have to look at how that's going to affect recreational boaters as well, because again, it's one of the most congested places and exciting places in our town is the Market Wharf in the summertime. It's always filled with people, it's always filled with boaters, it's filled with tourists, it's filled with local people. sometimes in the middle of the night fishing for squid, which is a great thing that goes on there that doesn't happen very many places. So we've got, and we all love that. But right now, again, is not the time to take chances with people's health. And so there's an idea of how things evolve so quickly. 2 days ago there were no rules. Now there's rules, right, that we now have to enforce. So we'll be going forward and dealing with that, and between now and the weekend for sure, because I'm anticipating that with holiday on Friday and a holiday on Monday, that in fact that would be the time that if I wasn't living here and it was a nice day, I might get in my car and try to drive here. So please, I can't emphasize too much how much we would appreciate as a town everyone taking care of us by not coming here and compromising anybody here. Because again, we just simply don't know the circumstances of those people, right? Whereas we get to know the circumstances of the people here, we basically know who just got back from Florida and who didn't, and therefore, if there are any issues, we can deal with those issues. If there aren't, and most people are following the rules and here, and we want to keep it that way.
I know it's so early to know, but speaking of Mayor Tory in Toronto, he's canceled events till, I believe, June 30th, and as you mentioned, Canada Day, we're still up in the air. Are we anticipating a slow tourist season this summer? What are the thoughts right now, and are you in communication with people like at the Algonquin, for instance?
Yeah, we are, and the Chamber, and the Chamber of Commerce is, I know people are very worried because, of course, all non-essential businesses are already shut down, not knowing when they can reopen. And so, yeah, we are anticipating, or at least I am. I can't speak for everyone, but I'm anticipating a very, certainly would be a slow start to the season, and I know there's some thought, we've had that discussion at Council, I know there's some thought that if this gets over by midsummer that there will be a bounce back, could be a bounce back of staycation people who didn't plan a trip anywhere else, a longer trip or to a more exotic place, and that we may get more internal New Brunswick visitors here on day trips and weekends and whatnot, and we hope for that if this all clears away. But I think it's a big stretch for anyone to assume that the fact that everything has been talked about now to the end of June, that will stay that way and that it won't be extended. So I think we have to anticipate, and we are already having our treasurer look at what's the impact of the tourism season, but more importantly, what's the impact of no revenue on the wharf, for example, because the revenue on the wharf last year was $150,000 for fees for the use of the wharf by people that use the wharf, right? Mostly on a commercial basis, but also on a recreational basis. Everyone pays for the services of the wharfinger and for the capital costs to maintain a wharf, which is a horribly expensive piece of real estate to maintain in the salt water, as you might imagine. And we have put millions of dollars into that wharf over the last 8 or 10 years. With the help of other levels of government, thankfully, because we wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. But right now, everybody's pulling in the resources for emergency purposes. And so we're going to have to face pretty much looking at what happens if all of our non-tax revenue disappears because of the pandemic. How are we going to adjust? What are we going to be able to do? What are we not going to be able to do? So
I should take a moment to also point out to people at home, and we're doing a series on it here in CHCO, is that you can support local still. A lot of stores are doing online shops. I bought my dog's dog food at Crocker Hill over the phone, and they left it outside for me. So if you can find ways, we are a community that comes together, which is wonderful. Can you talk about some services that are still working regularly? For instance, is garbage and recycling, are those still going to continue as normal?
As of now, that's normal, because garbage pickup is an essential service, because right now we're dealing with the the coronavirus, but if you don't pick up your garbage, you've got all kinds of other illnesses that befall you if you don't do that. So
some communities have moved away from recycling, though, but this is still in place here.
Absolutely, no, we are still in place as of now. Now, again, that could change. Again, the Regional Service Commission will have that front and center in terms of an issue. I sit on the commission on behalf of the town, and so I'm not anticipating that we're going to change that. I know there is a very recent change that we are no longer sending our recycling to the province of Quebec. We've actually, an operation to do the same thing has been set up now in Woodstock, New Brunswick. So our costs are going to go down. They're going to process our recycling again for no cost. And so that may come into play here. There may be some delays, which means that the recycling will go from the region to the landfill, but will be stored in our big recycling building, because as you remember, before we changed to curbside recycling from the blue bin system, we did that anyway. We were processing our recycling from that site. In other words, we were only recycling 3 things instead of 8 or 10 things like we're recycling now. So it was a much more minimal program, but we did it all from there. So we have the capacity to store recycling. So as it stands right now, no decision has been made to do anything different than transfer the recycling, hold the recycling if there's a bit of a time lag there to do it. And but at the end of the day, there are some places that have already made the decision to take the recycling and put it in the landfill, but we have not made that decision. And I think that would be a very tough decision for us to make, because there's a great deal of support in our region for the recycling program. It's been a marvelous thing. And again, I always say, I'm not so sure whether it's more economical or costs more, but I don't care, because it's the right thing to do. And most people in this region believe that too.
Well, and as we mentioned, things are changing all the time in our response to it. So I would love to have you back in maybe a week's time to do this again. And if you have questions at home, to send them to news@chco.tv or find us on Facebook at chco.tv. Send us your questions for the mayor, and we can talk again next week. Thanks, Doug, for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. I really appreciate this opportunity.